at the America-Israel Friendship League, where we know a thing or two about getting you outside, getting you into the places that really inspire and make you feel alive. My name is Wayne Firestone. I'm Executive Director of the America-Israel Friendship League. It's great to be with you here today. We are going to some port towns, some new port towns and some ancient port towns today with our dear friend, Reuven Solomon. Let me first ask everyone just to make sure you've had your coffee or your tea or your Gatorade or whatever it is that gets you going and keeps you going during the day for a virtual tour like this. Let's go back to your Opan Hebrew for those of you that took it. Does Ashdod and Ashkelon, do they begin with an aleph or an ayin? Hold off our native Sabra Hebrew speakers. Let's do a quick poll in the chat, a quick poll on Facebook. Is it an aleph? Is it an ayin? Is one with an aleph? Is one with an ayin? We know they both begin with A in English. So put it into your chat now. We'll see what comes in. We'll see what kind of Hebrew speakers we have, aleph or ayin. Either way, in English, it begins with an A, and that's where we're going today. Reuven, tell us a little bit about these two amazing sites that we're going to. We're going down south. Where are they? How close are they to each other? And even though they're sort of relatively close, I guess we're really talking very, very different histories and unique stories for each of them.
Shalom, Wayne. It's great to be with you all again, and welcome, friends of the AIFL. Today, we're going to take a ride from Tel Aviv all the way down to Ashkelon, which is actually, when we get to our first stop, we will be halfway to the Gaza, because our first stop at Ashdod along the coast of Israel is about 20 miles from Tel Aviv, and another 12 miles will take us to Ashkelon, and it's only another 8 miles from there to the Gaza. That's where we are in position, if you like, on the map of Israel, heading along the coast south. Now, both Ashdod and Ashkelon have something very much in common. They were both part of what we call the Penta cities of the Philistines, the people famous in the Bible, or infamous, if you like, in the Bible. And they had 5 cities when they settled in this part of the land and vie for the land with the Israelites, who are in the hills. They come from the sea, and they have their bases on the sea. In Gaza, in Ashkelon, in Ashdod, and then inland, close to Bet Shemesh, in Ekron, and closer to Jerusalem, in Gath. Those are the 5 Philistine cities. We'll be talking a little bit about the Philistines, but that won't be the main part of our tour, because both cities are relatively new cities. When I say relatively new cities, I'm talking about the modern parts, because both cities replace or are in between very ancient cities, but both of them mainly built on virgin land, with nothing really underneath the modern buildings, because the excavations revealed what the history and the modern parts of the cities were built in between the ancient parts. Ashdod, for instance, there was Ashdod by the sea, and inland Ashdod, and both of them, well, the one by the sea has been a little more settled around, but still the ancient buildings and the excavations are in open area, and Ashdod inland is quite intact, and the area in between is the modern day Ashdod. Ashdod is the 6th largest city in Israel, with about It only comes into the possession of modern-day Israel, even though, of course, in the past, in the 10th century BCE, King David had Ashdod under his wing, but in between then, that and now, Ashdod went through many different cycles. And it is only in 1949, in the Armistice Agreement, after the War of Independence, that Ashdod is allocated by the Armistice Agreement to Israel. On our way into Ashdod, Ashdod, as I said, is the sixth largest city, and it is vying for prominence as a seaport capital of entertainment in Israel. Actually, it's following the footsteps, if you like, of another older seaport entertainment site, Tel Aviv, that was built on sand dunes. But Tel Aviv is a little older. Tel Aviv is over 100 years old. And Ashdod, if you like, modern Ashdod and modern Ashkelon, around, if you count, around 60 years old. So Ashdod is vying for popularity as an entertainment center. If, as you come into Ashdod from the east, you come to a junction that is called Gesher Ad Halom, which translates in English to this point bridge, to this point bridge. It's an Ottoman bridge that spanned the Lachish River, the river called Lachish, and it was called by this very unique name, to this point bridge, because this is where the advance of the Egyptians in the War of Independence, whose northernmost base was in Ashkelon, had to come through to get to Tel Aviv. And this was where, in very serious struggles, the Israeli forces in this newly established state fought for its life, holding off the Egyptian advance north. And that's why it's called this point bridge. Of course, today the bridge has been replaced with a new modern bridge and highway. But I want to tell you a story that to this day brings goosebumps to me, because I had the privilege and luck of being on a tour as the tour guide of a very unique group to this site. And I want to tell you a little bit about this. It was in 1998, in May, as an anniversary of Israel's independence, the 50th anniversary of Israel's independence, that Machalnikim were invited to come and help, to come and celebrate with Israel 50 years of independence. So who are these Machalnikim? It's actually an acronym from the Hebrew, Mitnadvei Chutz La'aretz, which means overseas volunteers. And you may or may not know that in the War of Independence, many Jews and non-Jews came to help Israel in her struggle to survive. And these people who came and helped Israel out, amongst them some very famous names, were called Machalnikim, Mitnadvei Chutz La'aretz. And in 1998, I had the pleasure of being allocated as tour guide on the California bus. Now, do your math, and you'll figure that the volunteers were, at that time, the youngest of them, 75. The age range was between 75 and 85. And these were people who came, some of them brought the spouses along, and some of them actually were women volunteers. But these were people who came to to help Israel in her time of need. And I had the privilege of being on the California bus on our very first day. On the itinerary was a trip to the south and a stop at this very site, the Ad Halom Bridge, where incredible battles took place, where the small force of regular Israeli troops and volunteers, Machal volunteers, fought tooth and nail to stop the Egyptian advance, because they knew that, and that's why they vowed, and that's where the name comes from, to this point bridge. That's when they knew that if they allow the forces to come through them, that's it. The Egyptians are in Tel Aviv. And thus, they had a tremendous struggle. And here I'm telling them the story as we walk around this site by the bridge. And actually, it was on the bus before we get to the site where I'm telling them the story. And the bus captain, a young man who was much too young to be one of the volunteers, of course, runs up to me at the front of the bus and he says, "Reuven, Rudy Orgarten is on the bus." Thank goodness I knew a little bit of the history of the battle there and of the formation of the Israel Air Force, the IAF. And I knew that Rudy Orgarten played a major part in the air battles around this bridge that stopped the Egyptian advance. And thank goodness I had the presence of mind to tell the bus. But I've just heard that Rudy Orgarten is on the bus, and why should I be telling a second-hand story when Rudy Orgarten can tell us the inside story of what happened here? He was a tremendously modest man, and he said, "Go ahead, you tell the story." And what happened then, what happened next, was something I'll never forget. A busload of some 45, 75-year-olds and 85-year-olds clapping their hands saying, "Rudy, Rudy, Rudy." And he had no choice but to get up to the microphone and tell the story. And I'll never forget the story that he told of how he, amongst the very early volunteers to the Israeli Air Force, an ace in the air, had air battles over this bridge, bringing down a couple of Egyptian Spitfires. But he also told the story of how, in the very critical battle, 4 pilots, amongst them Ezra Weizmann, with Messerschmitts bought from, Czech copies of Messerschmitts bought from the Czech army and shipped in crates just put together. And Rudy said that what worried everyone, of course, was the parts left over, but the planes flew and saved the day at this incredible battle at this bridge. And wow, I said to myself, what a privilege to be here with these people and with someone like Rudy, who actually, with Ezra Weizmann, who was then president of Israel, on the same bus. And if that wasn't enough, as soon as Rudy gets back to his seat and sits down, another gentleman, I forget his name, I'm sorry, raises his hand and says, can I have a word in the mic as well? So of course, come ahead. And he said, well, I've waited 50 years for this. I want to thank Rudy for saving my butt. I was down there in those trenches when the planes that saved us from being overrun by forces saved the day. And I thought, wow. Well, that's the story I want to tell you doesn't end there, because, of course, as part of the celebrations, we were invited to visit the presidential residency with President Ezra Weizmann, who served alongside as a pilot with Rudy Orgarten. And you should have seen these two 80-year-olds, 75-year-olds run towards each other, hug each other and do this sort of dance when we came into the visit. It was something I shall never forget. Right now, after having I told you the story of the battles there, I want to also tell you that after the peace agreement with Egypt, leaving memorials that we left behind, that's a pillbox, incidentally, one of the battle, that the Brits, one of the battle sites during this struggle. But after leaving monuments to the fallen Israelis in areas that we vacated in the Sinai with the peace agreement with Egypt, the Egyptians requested that here, where Egyptian soldiers fell in the battle, because Israel actually had to push out the Egyptian soldiers before making this the up to this point bridge, requested a monument. And in the following slides, you shall see an impressive monument to the Egyptian fallen soldiers at this site in 3 languages. In English, you'll see it in the following slides, in English, in Arabic, of course, and in hieroglyphics. A monument to the fallen Egyptian soldiers at the site of the up to this point bridge. The monument, in the next couple of slides you see, the first one is going to be the monument for the Israeli fallen soldiers at this site. And then following that, you will see 2 slides of the Egyptian, the monument to the Egyptian soldiers, the one that I spoke about in English, Arabic, and hieroglyphics. This is the Israeli monument to the fallen soldiers of Operation Yoav, it was called, that held this to this point bridge, and then the advance was further south through Ashkelon. Egyptian monument. There it is, obelisk in the sky, 3 languages, and the next slide will give you an idea of its size, because you can see the person down below in front of it on the steps of the many names in the 3 languages around this site. Now, we will continue our tour into Ashdod, and the first impressive monumental ruin that we're going to see is this, what is called Fortress by the Sea. It's, as you can see, right by the sea, and it was built by a famous Caliph, Abdul Malik, who actually, when the Muslims conquer Ashdod, build this seafront fortress. He is very famous for having built the Dome of the Rock and the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. And here in Ashdod, he builds this fortress because Ashdod was by the sea, and the Byzantine navy had to be stopped. So he builds this fortress by the sea that is later on rebuilt, fortified again, and even the Crusaders get to use it. It's quite a massive building, even though it's in area not that large. Immense towers, as you'll see in the following slides, will give you an idea of the size of this. It was a 2, maybe even 3-story structure, and you'll see in the following slides that today one can actually visit and walk around in this fortress. And as I said, even in the time of the Muslims in Ashdod, there were 2 parts of Ashdod. The harbor, the sea, and this was protecting the sea, and another part of Ashdod inland, not connected with the seafront, where there were villages, Ashdod. Now, it's only in modern times that the modern city of Ashdod is in between these 2 points. In the following couple of slides, you'll see some views of parts of the fortress by the sea. And you can see here that there was much more than just one story. There were flights of stairs leading up. Ashdod, the little, it's not that little, harbor for yachts and pleasure craft, designed a little bit perhaps like, well, you know, the marina in Dubai sort of might have been the inspiration for this type of structure. But Ashdod's harbor is well known for its enormous cargo harbor that very quickly overtook in importance the harbor in Haifa. In fact, today, Ashdod is by far the largest of our seaport harbors and is responsible for bringing in more than 60% of our imports come through Ashdod Harbor. Ashdod Harbor, as you will see in the next slide, is an enormous structure, but at the very front part of it is a landing that is receiving more and more as the time passes cruise ships, because it's also a passenger port. Very convenient to get off your ship, your cruise in Ashdod and make your way to Jerusalem. Now, Ashdod, as I said, is vying for the title of entertainment center, and it has a modern art center in one part of town that has some beautiful structures that all cater to the entertainment and culture. This is the performing arts theater, beautifully designed. And beside it is the Mon Art Museum and other smaller theaters that are, as I said, vying for prominence with being an entertainment center. In the following slides, you will see a couple more of these structures. Another view of the Performing Arts Theater. And here you're looking at the largest, sometimes called amphitheater, but that's a mistake because it's not an amphitheater in proper terms. It's a theater, a Roman style theater. And this one has more than 6,000 seats. So Ashdod can also claim to have the largest in Israel outdoor entertainment venue. 6,000 in seats facing the stage. Now, Ashdod can also claim another world prize, and that is being the owner of the one and only totally dedicated museum to the Philistines. This museum is a collection of the Philistine culture through the ages in those 5 cities that I spoke of: Gaza, Ashdod, Ashkelon, Gath, and Ekron. And now we're going to depart Ashdod and head to Ashkelon. Our drive takes us along the seafront and heading past many centers with restaurants and parks, and in fact even the ruins of the Crusaders. Wayne, are there any questions coming in that we can talk about?
Well, I think there's a lot of sort of surprised about Ashdod is sort of a little bit below the radar screen. When did all this culture and activity begin, and who actually lives in Ashdod?
Oh, great question. First of all, Ashdod is very young. It only gets the heading new township 1956, and it bursts forward with immigrants. Ashdod has our largest Moroccan, Israeli, Moroccan descent residents, our largest collection of Georgian immigrant residents. That's in the massive immigration during the time of the Aliyah from the prior Soviet Union, the prior Russia, and also, from the time of the War of Independence, where there were two small parts, one by the harbor and one inland, the total population count by the British mandate, I think as late as the 1930s, was in the 2,000-3,000 mark. And in fact, it is only after the War of Independence, when it is allocated Ashdod and Ashkelon, that there is a modernization move, and Ashdod becomes the fastest growing city in Israel. From 0 to 100, as they say with car acceleration, Ashdod and Ashkelon too were tremendous in the burst that they gave from 0 to where they are today. And that's why, even can chuckle and smile when you hear that Ashdod is vying for Tel Aviv as being the entertainment capital. It's a long way from that, of course, but the speed that it's going, it won't be too much of a surprise if it eventually catches up. As we head out, as you can see, part of the entertainment center, and we're heading on the road to Ashkelon. And if you have a look at the sign out, you'll get a clue to Wayne's question. Aleph or Ein? We're going to run this light, but not really.
Reuven, I hope you didn't run that red light. Well, oh, okay, you stopped.
I knew it was going to turn green. And here we are heading out on the main road. Look at the sign that we're coming up to, and you'll see that we're about to enter Ashkelon. Another light to run.
How long of a ride is this, you said?
It's an 8-mile ride, so minutes away.
All right, we saw the Aleph.
Here we are. You saw the Aleph. Excellent. Here you are. Now you see the A in Ashkelon. Actually, this is another one of the Hebrew cities that can be spelt in different ways. You can see it spelt in with a Q sometimes, and sometimes even with a C. But Ashkelon is the third largest city of the southern district in Israel, after Beersheba and Ashdod. And Ashkelon, incidentally, has 2 sister cities that might be of interest. Actually, 3 sister cities, if I remember rightly. Tampa and Los Angeles actually are sister cities to Ashdod. But in Ashkelon, it is Portland and Sacramento in California, that are sister cities to Ashkelon. Ashkelon was the capital of the Canaanite coastal towns, and some amazing, incredible discoveries of this Canaanite period have come to light in Ashkelon. And as I said, it's relatively a new city, about 100 and maybe 35,000 residents, and again, a lot of immigrants. Here you're seeing a dig, a very early dig from the Canaanite period of Ashkelon, and we can boast in Ashkelon to have the oldest arch in the world in pretty good condition. It is an arch from the Canaanite period that had more than one story, a slide of it in just a moment, that has been preserved to a tremendous content. It was all covered, of course, and you can see some restoration has taken place, but it is the world's oldest arch, dated around 1800 BC during the Canaanite period, before the Israelites come through in around 1200 and vie for the land with the Philistines. But we have some amazing ruins in Ashkelon from the Canaanite period, but it is more famous for being the Philistine capital. You know, I didn't mention that in Ashdod there was the temple to Dagon that figures in the story of the Ark of the Covenant. But here in Ashkelon too, the Philistines have a major hold. That's why it was one of the 5 cities. And we'll be talking in a little bit more detail about the Philistines in just a moment. But the picture that comes through about the Philistines is very different to what the general idea of what the Philistines were like. You know, sometimes you say someone's a Philistine if you're talking about someone who's uncultured and so on. Well, they really don't deserve that reputation. They had, even though they were worshipping idols, they had quite a high standard of living. And in the following slides, you may be able to get some. They belong to what we generally consider the sea peoples, because around this time when the Philistines appear, even before the Philistines appear, this is a depiction from the tomb of Ramses II, of his battles with the sea peoples who come through, and Egypt struggles with them, but eventually overcomes the incursions into Egypt. But the depictions that we see of these sea people are depictions that resemble other depictions of the particular sea people. That's why we believe that the Philistines were actually a group of these sea people who stay behind. And they stay behind because they conquer 5 cities from the Canaanites, and then eventually struggle with the Israelites right up until the Babylonian expulsion of Nebuchadnezzar. The last of the cities in Ashkelon is held by the Philistines. In the following slides, you're going to see a pretty amazing discovery of the very first extensive cemetery discovered of the Philistines. You know, archaeologists used to joke because at all of these Philistine digs, cemeteries were hard to find. You found here and there a burial, here and there a burial, but no massive burials that would be correspondent with a city. And thus there was a joke amongst the archaeologists that the Philistines were a little like the Vikings, that they had their burials at sea, where there was no cemetery and the body was just thrown overboard, well, being sea people. But this discovery, only 5 years ago, of an extensive Philistine cemetery gives us at last a hope that we may be able to finally solve the riddle of who these people are. Well, we're still a long way from it because we're waiting results of DNA, extensive testing. But here in the cemetery, at long last, we find evidence that they did bury, and they buried in different methods. Look at this burial, for instance. You see a little jug by the person's nostril. Well, in the following slides, you will see the jug itself, a little jug, a perfume jug, so that the poor fellow wouldn't smell himself, I suppose, placed close to his nostril. But what we found as well that was very surprising was a burial method of some children who were buried. You're going to see the graves in just a moment, who were buried with a blanket, if you like, of broken pottery pieces over the burial. And this is being investigated to see if it corresponds with some burial methods in ancient Greece, because jugs were found and children were buried under a blanket of ceramic pieces, of broken clay pieces. In the following slide, you're going to see that they ate pretty well. Look at his teeth, remarkably good condition, better than mine, in fact. And this was one of the finds in this cemetery that have given hope to the archaeologists of solving this riddle of who the Philistines really were. Now, the Philistines, of course, disappear from history. As I said, the last of the remains of a Philistine presence was in the time of the exile of Nebuchadnezzar, who doesn't only exile the Jews from Jerusalem, but also the Philistines from their towns. And the last of the Philistine town that was already probably very much integrated into the local culture was from 630 BC. And since then, no record of the Philistines except in the museum in Ashdod. This beautiful sarcophagus with another couple were discovered in what is today Ashkelon's National Park, where the Roman city was, or parts of the Roman city and burials were. And this is considered one of the most beautiful of the decorated sarcophagi that were found. A Roman, during the Roman period in this seaport. But from the Roman period, we're going to jump a little bit ahead. And here I have another long and I hope interesting story to tell you of how Ashdod figures in history, in world history. You're looking at a slide taken just before the War of Independence, not that long before the War of Independence. We're talking about the latest 1930s, maybe even early 1940s, of the small village on a distant hill, not so distant today, on a lonely hill in Ashkelon, where a beautiful mashad, a monument in Arabic, and a beautiful mosque was built. And what happened to this mosque, of course, we will talk about. But here on this lonely hill in Ashkelon, a remarkable story links Ashkelon to world events, a watershed mark in Islam. And for that, we have to go back to Muhammad and the death of Muhammad, when Abdul Bakr, his close confidant and friend, becomes the first caliph after Muhammad. Following Abdul Bakr are two caliphs, Umar and Osman, who are accepted by the warring factions of the different factions of Islam at that time. And after him, after the first three, comes the fourth, whose name was Ali Ibn Ali bin Talib, who was the last really of the caliphs who were accepted by the general different warring factions, if you like, of forming Islam. I'm talking about 680 now, around 680. Now, Ali designates two of his sons to be the heirs to continue the rule as caliphs, Hassan and Hussein. Hassan is involved in warring factions in the first, if you like, almost civil war amongst the different tribes. And Muawiyah, who establishes the dynasty of the Umayyads in Damascus, gets Hassan to abdicate, to sign a deal allowing Muawiyah to be the caliph. This was in the first spots of trouble. Muawiyah leaves his son, Yazid, to continue the rule, but now there's trouble brewing. And in the second revolt, if you like, of different tribes, there are supporters of the son of Ali, the Imam Hussein Ibn Ali, who is being given backing by the factions in Iraq, Karbala and Kufa, to take over and rule as Islam. Cut a long story short, he is, during Mecca, during the Hajj, 680, he is overtaken by Yazid's forces. He and 18 members of his family, along with another 72 of his supporters, are massacred. Their heads placed, of the commanders, including the Imam Hussein, his head is placed on a lance and taken to Damascus as proof of Yazid's victory over the Imam Hussein. Now, the Imam Hussein was a grandson of Muhammad, because Ali was the husband of Fatima, Muhammad's daughter, and thus Yazid realizes that, hey, he can't get away with this without doing something to honor Imam Hussein. So he orders that the Hussein's head is placed in his palaces, his Umayyad palace in Damascus, where there's a beautiful mosque, an enormous mosque that replaced an earlier church, a Byzantine church. And Hussein's head is placed in this mosque. Another head was placed in that mosque 600 years earlier. That was John the Baptist when it was a church. But now in the mosque, Hussein's head is set. But now here there's a problem. This event was a watershed in Islam, where now there is clearly a large faction who are visiting two shrines. One in Karbala, where the body of Imam Hussein is, and the second one in Damascus, where his head is. And they call themselves the Shia, which actually means the faction. And this is the birth of the faction that is to this day called Shia and Sunni. But I need to tell you, you might ask, what has all this got to do with Ashkelon? Well, I'll race ahead to tell you that eventually, rule after rule, the Abbasids come into power, and they decide we can't have this two sites with hordes of Shia coming to visit. We're going to send Hussein's head to the most remote part of our empire, and that is in Palestina, on a hill in Ashkelon, one of our furthest away conquests. So Hussein's head is buried without a tombstone, without anything, on the highest, at least it had the honor, no marking, but the honor of being on the highest spot in Ashkelon, 70 meters above sea level. Today, the Barzilai Hospital is near that spot and around that spot. But that's not where the story ends. Hussein's head in Ashkelon remains there until the Fatimids come into power. And their name comes from their association with Fatima, Muhammad's daughter. And one of the imams decides in around 1090, something like that, no, earlier, 1060, that he wants to give honor now to Hussein's head, and he sends his advisor to faraway Ashkelon to find the head. The story goes that the visor, Jamali, has a serious prayer, and the earth opens up, and he sees in the hole on this hill, where the earth opens up, a tray covered with a green cloth, and the green cloth is Hussein's head, with fresh blood. So he decides, of course, to build a mashad, a monument, and beside the monument, a beautiful mosque. The mosque with the midbar that you saw earlier on the slides. And if we can go back to the slide of the minbar, the pulpit, you'll see that this one earlier, you will see that this pulpit in this one is still standing today, but not in Ashkelon, but in Hebron. In Hebron, in the tomb of our patriarchs. And that becomes a mosque. And this minbar today stands there. Why? Because when Saladin takes over after his victory at the Horns of Chittim, the Crusaders come back and he decides to destroy Ashkelon because he realizes that Ashkelon will be a target of the Crusaders. But before destroying, he sends this minbar to what he considered was a safe place, Hebron, and that's where it stands to this day. It's beautifully inscribed, and if we have time, I'll tell you about the inscription on this minbar. But the head of Hussein doesn't remain in Ashkelon, because when the Fatimids see that their headquarters are in Cairo, they're in danger of losing to the Seljuks, who were belonging to the Sunni. They decide to transport the head of Hussein, Imam Hussein, to their capital, to Cairo, where it is, according to tradition, to this day, in the mosque. How do they transport it? In the next slide, you will see this very beautiful teak box that dates to that period. That teak box today is in the Cairo Museum, not that far away from the mosque where the head is actually supposed to be today. And so the head of either Imam Hussein makes its way from Kufa and Karbala to Damascus, spends some time in Damascus, is then sent to Ashkelon, spends some time in Ashkelon, and finally makes its journey to Cairo. About a 500 year journey from Iraq to Egypt. Now, Moshe Dayan, in the 70s, after the Six-Day War in 1967, but in the 70s, he actually visits the Tomb of the Patriarchs, and he stands beside the minaret, the minbar, the minbar that you saw in the previous slide, and he sees some engraved stone on the ground. He didn't realize perhaps that the minbar was actually from Ashdod, but he was a bit of an archaeologist, Moshe Dayan, and he recognizes that that stone was part of an inscription in beautiful Kufic Arabic script of a passage from the Quran, and he knew that that came from Ashkelon. The other 4 stones, it was a 5-stone inscription, the other 4 stones are not far from where that teak box that you're seeing there is in the Cairo Museum. So parts of Ashkelon have been exported to many different places. The Barzillai Hospital now stands on the grounds. As I said, Saladin dismantles Ashkelon, and you saw what little remained of the beauty of the mosque and so on after the struggles, the Islamic struggles. But in the War of Independence, there's even more damage, and no mashad, no monument. It is only in the 2000s, 2002, 2004, I'm not sure exactly when, where the descendants of the Fatimids, who are mainly today in India and Pakistan, because they escaped from Cairo to Yemen, and then from Yemen to India and Pakistan, requested to build a shrine where the head was, on this highest hill in Ashkelon. And of course, there was agreement, and they built, as you'll see in the following slide or two, a beautiful marble shrine where thousands of Indians used to come, Indians and Pakistani Fatimid members used to come on pilgrimage, and will do again as soon as the air is opened again for flights, of where Hussein's head, after his post-mortem travels, stopped for a period. Wayne, if there are any comments, questions, or anything?
So first of all, I guess I can't help but comment that I much prefer our contemporary technology of transporting heads on this virtual screen. Seems a lot more efficient and less problematic for other reasons. But in the meantime, there are some comments and questions. First of all, we want to give a shout out to Baltimore. Janet points out that Baltimore is the city for Ashkelon, great port town, great city of culture as well. There is a question about references in the Bible to Ashkelon and Ashdod, and at least one of our commentators referred to the book of Samuel and David's lament of the deaths of Saul and Jonathan as a reference point.
Absolutely, because these were marked Philistine cities. In fact, Samuel, the first book of Samuel, chapter 5 and 6, mention Ashdod at least 11 times, with the Ark of the Covenant being taken there, with the incredible event that takes place in the temple of Dagon, who was a Philistine god, and according to the first book of Samuel, chapter 5, the Philistines, after taking the Ark of the Covenant to the temple, find Dagon, the statue of Dagon, prostrate on the floor the next morning. So they set him back up again, put him up on his feet again, but the day after that, they find him back on the floor with his head and his dismembered. And they realize, hey, there's something on here, and they break out with boils, and they send the ark to the following cities. They goes from Ashdod to Ashkelon, and then to Gath, and eventually via Bet Shemesh to the Israelites. So Ashdod gets a lot of mention. In the time of the Philistines, all 5 cities were important. In the David's lament, of course, he laments that they should not rejoice. At least actually Saul talks about run through by a sword so that death won't be rejoiced by those in Ashdod and Ashkelon. Ashdod also has some negative connotations in the Bible, because apparently after the return of the Jews of the Babylonian exile, return of the Jews in the time of Cyrus, Persia, Ashkelon still had remnants of non-Jews living there, and according to Nehemiah, the Jews of Jerusalem took them as wives, and hence there was a distinct difference between the Jerusalemites, and they were called the Ashdodites, whose children didn't speak proper Hebrew. That's what the Bible talks about. But eventually, of course, incidentally, what you're seeing here, of course, is a walk along the promenade of Ashkelon, along the seafront, the yachts and so on. A beautiful place to visit. Nice hotel, great restaurants, and we're just waiting for Corona to pass over us, and we'll get back to all the fun things we used to do.
Well, looking at these images in the background of Ashkelon, looking at the seashore, looking at the modern architecture, really exciting. And the children's playgrounds, it looked like maybe a whale in the form of, I don't know if that was a Jonah image. There looks like just really a playground of fun to explore. And indeed, you've taken us to 2 amazing places. And I know you mentioned previously, Reuven, when we were speaking about it, that Ashdod, in addition to 60% of imported goods coming through the port, now the big cruise ships as well, when they're in operation, obviously prior to COVID, that this is now a favored port of entry for tourism as well. So really a tremendous amount to see and experience. I know a lot of what I'm seeing today looks new and different from times I've visited in the past. So I'm sure you've whet the appetite for many to come visit, to see the Philistines Museum. Didn't know that. We can cover a lot of historic ground for our history buffs, dating back to the Canaanites and obviously Greco and Roman architecture as well. So thanks for taking us to all those great places. As always, we continue our virtual tour series again next month, but you don't have to wait long for a little sunshine, because we're going to let the sunshine in this coming Wednesday in our next webinar. We've got experts from Israel talking about climate innovation that is emanating from Israel, including, importantly, solar power. We'll have 3 different perspectives from industry, from government, and from the nonprofit sector. So come join us again this coming, look at the surfer in the background, perfect. If you're thinking about a great place to go and visit as soon as the travel restrictions are over or you've been vaccinated, we've given you a lot to think about, maybe some new destinations for the future. Everyone have a safe week. Reuven, thanks to you for, as always, bringing us new insights and new perspectives on amazing places throughout Eretz Yisrael. And we even know how to spell Ashkelon and Ashdod correctly now in Hebrew. So we'll sign off for this week, wishing everybody a great Shavua Tov.
Shalom, and have a wonderful week. We'll see you next month.